the cursed summit, an endless fall. Ever since I was a kid, I've had this unexplainable allure for the untraveled, for the secret corners of the earth that hold stories waiting to be discovered. So when I found out about Black Peak, I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I managed to convince my 3 best friends, Sarah, Sam, and Lily, to accompany me on this grand adventure. As we prepared for our hike, we laughed at the local legends that surrounded the formidable mountain, never imagining we would be the next chapter in its gruesome lore. The first 2 days on Black Peak were a dream. We were young, invincible, explorers charting unknown territory. The mountain was rugged and demanding, but we matched its challenges with determination and camaraderie. The sun shone brightly on us during the day, and the night offered a symphony of stars against a velvet sky. Despite the hard work, it felt like an escape from the world. But in retrospect, perhaps it was a descent into a world we were ill-prepared for. Day 3 marked the beginning of our ordeal. A blanket of thick fog set in, its icy tendrils crawling over the landscape and swallowing everything in sight. The world below disappeared, replaced by a spectral abyss, and we found ourselves isolated, entrapped on the mountain that was quickly becoming less of an adventure and more of a formidable adversary. Our laughter grew less frequent, replaced by a stifling tension that hung in the air like a specter. By the 4th day, we were completely lost in the fog. Our previously detailed maps were now no more than paper. Everything looked the same, hazy silhouettes of rocks and an endless sea of white. Time seemed to stretch, every second turning into an eternity. Even the most light-hearted among us, Sarah, grew silent, her usual chirpiness replaced by a hollow look. As the days dragged on, a sense of dread seeped into our group. Sam, the most rational of us, began to question our safety. He proposed that we should start our descent and give up on reaching the summit. But we held onto the lingering strands of our initial excitement, stubbornly pushing the fear to the back of our minds. On the 7th day, reality shook us out of our denial. It was Sarah who fell first. In a heart-stopping moment, she slipped off the trail into the thick fog. One moment she was there, and then she was just gone. Her scream, a haunting echo in the chilling silence, was a rude awakening to our impending doom. Our world came crashing down, replacing the thrill of adventure with a cold, numbing fear. As we tried to make sense of the loss of Sarah, the mountain took another one of us. Sam, who had always been cautious, somehow lost his footing while trying to secure a campsite near a cliff. His terrified yell bounced around the mountainside, leaving Lily and me in horrified disbelief. The loss was too great, too quick. Fear turned into a living nightmare, and we found ourselves trapped on a peak that was slowly consuming us, one friend at a time. Our group, once vibrant and full of life, was down to just Lily and me. Lily started to unravel, mumbling about a curse, her words spiraling into a chaotic chorus of paranoia and fear. I tried to console her, but I could feel my own sanity teetering on the edge. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my eyes and whispers filled the air, but I pushed forward, driven by a desperate desire to survive. That fateful night, under the sliver of moonlight piercing through the fog, Lily walked off the edge. She was talking about joining Sarah and Sam, her voice eerily calm. I reached out too late. Her absence left me alone, grappling with the horrifying reality of my situation. Determined to escape this living nightmare, I began my descent the next day. However, the mountain wasn't done with me. I started hearing my friends' voices. They whispered in the wind, their laughter, their conversations, echoing around me. Their ghostly forms appeared at the edge of cliffs, inviting me to join them. My mind teetered on the brink of madness. On the final day, I reached the last perilous ledge. The fog had finally lifted, revealing the path to safety. But as I prepared to take the first step down, my friends called to me one last time. "Join us, Jonas," they whispered. "It's beautiful here." Turning around, I saw them smiling at the edge, their hands reaching out. Their beckoning was almost irresistible, the longing to join them pulling at my very soul. But I had to resist. I had to survive. Their voices grew louder, their forms shifting into monstrous figures as I turned away. I forced myself to ignore them, to take one step, then another, until I finally reached safe ground. Exhausted, I collapsed, surrendering to unconsciousness. When I awoke, I was in a hospital, the nightmare of Black Peak a fading echo. I was the lone survivor of our reckless adventure, a living testimony of the mountain's merciless curse. The memories of my friends and the whispers from the edge will forever haunt me, a chilling reminder of the cost of our ill-advised quest. The terrifying tales of Black Peak had claimed 4 victims, leaving me as the sole survivor, forever bound to its chilling legacy. Edge of Slumber, a walk with fear. I've always been a sleepwalker, drawn into the night by a force I could neither understand nor control. The affliction started in my childhood, an unwelcome inheritance from my mother's side of the family. Back then, it was innocent enough. I'd simply wake up in a different room, disoriented but safe within the confines of my home. Lately, however, my morning awakenings have been tinged with an eerie sense of foreboding. The familiarity of my room has been replaced by the open air, dew-soaked grass under my bare feet, and the cold, silver light of the moon painting an ethereal landscape. The first time it happened, I awoke in our backyard. The sensation of the soft earth beneath me was disconcerting, but there was something almost peaceful about it. The rhythmic hum of crickets filled the silence of the early dawn, and the stars twinkled overhead, as if keeping vigil over my sleep-induced wanderings. The next night, it happened again, only this time, I was further away from the house. I woke up shivering, the cold seeping into my bones. It took me a few disoriented moments to realize where I was, at the edge of our property, just where the land began its sharp descent into the cliffside. I retraced my steps back to the house, my heart pounding with a primal fear. As I reached the familiar comfort of my home, I looked back once at the cliff looming ominously in the dim morning light. I decided to dismiss it as a bizarre coincidence. But then, the pattern continued, each night pushing me farther and farther away from safety, each morning awakening closer and closer to the precipice. Then, the unthinkable happened. One night, I woke to the violent roar of the ocean beneath me. Dizziness washed over me as I realized that I was lying precariously close to the edge of the cliff. My legs dangled over the side, the tops of the waves crashing far below, almost lost in the darkness. Panic surged through me, each heartbeat thundering in my ears. The ground beneath me felt perilously thin, as if ready to crumble away into the foaming abyss below. The wind was stronger here, threatening to pull me into the sea with its persistent gusts. It was as if the earth, the wind, the entire night was conspiring against me. The final destination of my sleepwalking journey stood before me, a menacing drop into the oblivion. But then, a familiar sound anchored me in my fear-induced frenzy, the soft hoot of the owl perched on our old oak tree. Home. I needed to get back home. With a trembling determination, I pulled myself back from the edge. Every inch away from the cliff was a victory over the strange force that had drawn me to it. I knew now, my problem was bigger, scarier than I had ever imagined. I needed help. For now, I was safe, back in the familiar grasp of my home. But the cliff, the silent predator, it would wait. And I had to make sure I would never meet it again. Dizzying heights, the skyscraper horror, as the glass elevator climbed the skeletal giant of cold steel and glass known as the Citadel Tower, my pulse hammered in my chest like a prisoner's futile attempts at escape. I was a lamb to the slaughter. Not by choice, but by the chains of my occupation. I was an architect, trapped in the web of grandeur and ambition that this latest, must-see, construction, my firm's magnum opus, represented. But it was more than that, it was a silent monster, towering far beyond anything 2 stories, my well-guarded limit. Acrophobia, the fear of heights. My secret curse, now a public spectacle. The cityscape unfolded as the elevator scaled the heights, morphing into an alien world of distant twinkling lights and abstract structures. It was as though I were perched on a rickety stool, peering over the edge of an abyss. The elevator spat me out onto the top floor, an opulent expanse mimicking an observation deck, complete with a restaurant and bar. Unforgiving floor-to-ceiling windows flaunted the dizzying view below. The low murmur of city life, once comforting, now sounded like a death knell, magnifying my pulsating dread. As I neared the window, clammy sweat dampened my palms and my heartbeat echoed in my ears like a frantic Morse code. I wobbled, a wave of vertigo making me stagger back, gasping for stability. I felt a hand grip my shoulder. "You okay?" It was Sarah, my colleague, her face etched with concern. I'm just fine," I stammered, pasting on a smile. As the night deepened, the city lights assumed an eerie glow, casting spectral shadows that flitted around the room. Suddenly, I felt a sinister tremor from the bowels of the building. The floor began to sway, gently at first, then with growing violence. It was no illusion. It was no symptom of my fear. The tower was lurching. A waiter dropped a tray, the clatter of silverware sounding a chilling alarm. A chorus of screams echoed around as the building rocked back and forth. The word "earthquake" was torn from someone's lips. The building groaned, shuddering with an inhuman roar. The mammoth windows shattered in unison, hurling deadly shards of glass down like an icy, fatal hailstorm. Panic-stricken people stampeded toward the elevators, but the lights flickered and died. We were caged animals, high above the ground, in a swaying death trap. Sarah and I huddled under a table, clutching the steel legs as if they were the last threads of hope. I shut my eyes tight, an attempt to escape the nightmare of glass, steel, and terror surrounding us. Suddenly, everything ceased. The room fell into a deafening silence before the moans and sobs filled the void. Sarah and I emerged, faces pale and drawn. We had survived, but we were marooned atop a crippled monolith, suspended between heaven and earth. Fear throbbed in my veins at the thought, but I couldn't succumb now. There were lives at stake. My phobia was a tangible beast, looming over me, ready to pounce. But now, I had to grapple with it, tame it. This macabre spectacle was my worst nightmare morphed into gruesome reality. In the face of this chilling ordeal, acrophobia wasn't a mere phobia anymore, it was a monstrous adversary I had to defeat. Life and death had become the stark consequences of this grand game of fear.